Hello, my amazing students. This is Mrs. A, and I love math. And today we're doing lesson 81 in your Saxon Blue Book. And we're talking about percents greater than 100. Now, when you're looking at the initial amount in a percent problem is the whole or the 100%. So here we're talking about a percentage of 300. And so 300 is the before number, and it's the 100%. And then 600 is 200% of the 300. And 200% is a big percentage. It's over 100. And if we were going to write it, 200% is the same thing. Remember, percent means parts out of 100. So we have 200 parts out of 100. 200 divided by 100 is the same as 2. So 200% is really 2 times the number. Okay, so whenever you see 200%, think of doubling a number, and 300% would be tripling a number. Okay, so anytime the after number is greater than the before number, then our percent is over 100. Okay, so they're saying you're going to get this bigger second picture when the percent is greater than 100, or the is part of the problem is greater than the of part of the problem. So 600 is 200% of 300. The is part of the problem is the 600, and the of is the 300. And when the is greater than the of, then we have a bigger diagram. Now, later on, you're not going to need diagrams all the time, but right now, while you're learning, it's nice to draw a diagram. I always think this looks like a peanut. Don't you think that looks like a peanut? So I call these peanut diagrams. When the after number is greater than the before number, then your percentage is greater than 100. Okay, so here we're going back a little bit and reviewing also, because remember we talked about percents that were less than 100, and now we're talking about percents that are greater than 100. When we talked about percents less than 100, this is 40%, so that's less than 100. Then our after diagram was a split diagram, and it looked kind of like this. Okay, so here if we were going to put these words into a diagram, it would not be a peanut, it would be a split, kind of like an egg. Okay, so here we would say 40% of, remember the of number goes over here because this is the total, of what number, so we could just put what number, is 60. Whoops, it's supposed to be 160. I copied. Okay, so I corrected my 160. So remember that we split this up into smaller and bigger part, and since 40% is less than 50%, I'm going to put it in the smaller part. So 40% is 160, and then we had to remember that 40% is only part of the 100%. This one right here was the 100%. What does 40% need to complete the 100%? Well, it needs 60%, doesn't it? So we are going to have to find this number over here. So if 40% is 160, 60% is what? So that would be my diagram. And we don't even know what my whole number is, right? We just know that this is before and this is after when it's split up into 40% and 60%. So that would be one way to diagram this problem. So 40% of what number is 160? So 40% is 160. We don't know what the whole number is. And we don't know what the 60% is. When we're done, when we find that number, we could add the two together to get the what number, right? So now we're going to write this out into an equation, because although the diagrams are very fun to look at, what we're saying here is that 40% of some number is 160. Okay, so we're going to say 40%. I want you to be able to do it not only with the diagram, but also with an equation. 40% of times what number is 160. Okay, so this is the same thing in an equation form. 40% of what number is 160. So you need to be able to do it both ways. So now let's look at it. We want to find out what number is. So we're going to have to write 40% either as a fraction or a decimal. So remember that 40% is the same thing as 40 divided by 100. So that's going to be 2 decimal places that way. So I've got 0.40 times what number is 160. So can I divide both sides by 0.40, which is the same thing as 0.4? So I'm going to divide by 0.4 on this side and divide by 0.4 on this side. Okay, so when I'm dividing by a decimal, remember that really makes things hard. So what I do when I'm dividing by a decimal, so this is gone, we just have what number is 160 divided by 0.4. I don't like a decimal in my divisor. I'm going to multiply by 10 and multiply by 10. So now 1600 divided by 4 is the same thing. 16 divided by 4 is 4. I tack on the 2 zeros and I get 400. So my big number, what number is 400? So right here, this number is 400. Now that I know that's 400, I know that these two numbers must add to 400. So 400 take away 160 is going to be 240. And now my problem is all filled in. Okay, now we're still on example 1, but example 1, I went into a little bit more detail there because I wanted to review with you. But now the big part about example 1 is it says which problems are going to need a split diagram that looks kind of like an egg, okay? And which one of these are going to need peanut diagrams where the after looks like a peanut. Okay, so this, remember, is when we have a percentage that's greater than 100, and this is when our percentage is less than 100 and splits our number up. Okay, so this one says what percent, which we don't know what that percentage is, of 140, so the 140 number would be the one on the left, right? Of goes on the left, is 60. This 60 is splitting up this number, isn't it? So we would use the split diagram for that one, not the peanut diagram. Okay, so I call this one the peanut diagram. They call this a one part. Okay, and then I call this one split. They call it a two part. Okay, so they're the same thing. I just call them something different. So you can call them what you want to, as long as you know how to do them. All right, what percent of 60 is 140? Okay, so now remember that is going to go over here, and it is bigger than the of. So we're going to use a peanut diagram, which is a one part in their book. Okay, because the is greater than the of, we're going to use the one part diagram, which looks like a peanut. All right, so this is the next example. Same example, part D. So now 140% of 20 is what number? We don't know both of the numbers, we just know one, but we do see the percent is greater than 100. Therefore, we're going to have a peanut diagram over here, and that's a one-parter in their book. Okay, so here, the is number is greater than the of number. Okay, so the of number is the whole, isn't it? And the is greater than that, so we're going to have a peanut. Even though we don't know what the percent is, our percent is larger than 100. Okay, so here we're doing our first, our second example. What number is 140% of 80? So we know we're going to need a peanut, don't we? Okay, so now remember that this was the fractional formula that the Saxon book gives you. And this is what they call the ratio formula. They're both accurate. They're both fine ways to do it. I prefer to do mine with just remembering that the of means times and the is means equal. So I do this one, but I don't really memorize a formula. I just go with of is times, is equals, and it turns out to be the same thing. This one is setting up a proportion. It works fine too. The percentage over 100 is equal to the is over the of. They both work. I'm going to usually use this one, but I'm going to try to show you both. So let's do this one with this format first. Okay, so basically I'm going to just say, what number is equal 140%. We put the percent on the over 100. Of is times 80. Okay, so we're doing the same thing that they're doing, except I'm writing it exactly the way they read it. Everywhere I see an is, I'm putting an equal. Everywhere I see an of, I put a times. Okay, so basically this one is going to already solve for this, isn't it? So can I just go ahead and cancel out those zeros? Since I have the 0 on the top and the bottom, I can do that, can't I? So now I've got 14 divided by 10 times 80. Let's put the 80 over 1. Now, I canceled out the zeros, but can I do more canceling to make this easy? Can I take the 80 and the 10 and cancel and just put an 8 and a 1? That was easy, wasn't it? So now I've got 14 times 8 is the number I'm looking for. So 14 times 8, 4 times 8 is 32, and I'm going to get an 11. So 102 is the number. 102 is 140% of 80. Okay, so we'll do this one in the next form, but now we've got to draw a diagram. Oops, I think I said that was 102. That's 112, isn't it? Okay, so what we're going to do, oops, I erased my problem, and my problem said what number is 140% of 80. Okay, so that was my original. And now I'm going to do my diagram. Remember, my of 80 goes over here. And since my after number is bigger, I'm going to say 112 is 140%. Because the 112 is bigger than the 80, it goes in a peanut. All right? So it's not a split, it's a bigger. And those are kind of fun to draw. Okay, so this time we're going to use the ratio format. Remember that over here on the left we always put of, and that's our 100%. So the of and the 100 always go on the bottom. The percentage and the is always go on the top. Okay, so I'm going to show you how this is exactly equal to what we did the other time, but let's just start this way. P over 100. What percent? We don't know what percent, so let's just use P. So we'll say P over 100 is the is number, which is 160, over the of number, which is 40. Okay, so now I'm trying to get the P by itself because I want to know what percent. So now, can I just multiply both sides? I could just cross multiply, so let's cross multiply. When I cross multiply, I get 40p is 100 times 160 Well, we know what the 100 does. It just moves the place value, right? So we have 40p is 160 with 2 more zeros, because that's what multiplying by 100 does. And then we divide by the 40, and we divide by the 40, and we get p equals. So p is my percentage, and I can cancel 1 0 on both the top and the bottom. 1,600 divided by 4 is going to be 400. Okay, so we have 400% is the answer. Okay, now if I were going to do that my other way, okay, then I would do without this, and I would say, what percent would be p over 100 of 40 is times 40 is 160. Okay, can you see how this is going to be exactly the same as this when we divide both sides by 40? So if I divide this by 40 and this by 40, don't I get the ratio form? It's the same thing, isn't it? Okay, so now that we already know the answer, it's 400%. Let's draw our peanut diagram. Okay, so we're going to say 400% over here, because that's what we found out. We're going to make this a big peanut. Okay, and we're going to say that what percent, 400%. Here is our of number of 40. And then we're going to say 160 is 400% of 40. And there's our answer in diagram form. Okay, so 150% of what number is 300? So this is our last example before you start your practices. Okay, so we're going to say, if we were going to draw a diagram first, we can draw a diagram first. We would say of what number goes here. Okay, and we would say 150%, so this is definitely going to be a peanut, isn't it? So we'd put 150% is 300. So that's our diagram, but we're missing something. Okay, so let's go ahead and do it. 150% is just 150 over 100. Of means times. What number is 300? Okay, so I can easily get rid of a 0 and a 0. So now I've got the 15 divided by 10. That's 1.5, isn't it? So I have 1.5 times what number is 300. Can I just divide both sides by 1.5? I could do that. Or I could keep it in a fraction form, and I could multiply by 10 over 15 and multiply this side by 10 over 15. Because remember, multiplying by a reciprocal will cancel those fractions right out of there, and I get what number is 300 times 10 over 15. Well, that's easy to cancel because 30 and 15, 30 is 15 times 2. So I end up with 300 with another 0. So isn't that 3,000 divided by 15? So let's write that down. We'll do it right here. 3,000 divided by 15, but the 30 and the 15 will cancel with the 2, so the answer is 200. Okay, and so the what number is 200, so instead of the what number, we'll put 200. We have solved our problem. We'll be back with some practices. Okay, the first part of the practice A, is just going through each one of these and deciding whether we're going to have a split diagram, which they call a two-parter, or a peanut diagram, which they call a one-part. So remember that the difference is whether the percentage is less than or greater than 100. So here in this first one, it says 40% of what number is 240. Now, 40% is less than 100. So wouldn't we use the split diagram that looks like an egg? Okay, that's the one we're going to use for that one. The next one says 150% of what number is 240? 150% is greater than 100%, so we will use the peanut diagram. What percent of 40 is 240? Now here the is number is greater than the of number. That's another peanut diagram. What percent of 240 is 40? This one's going to be a split diagram because you've got the of number is bigger and the is number is a part of it. What percent of 20 is 80? The is number is greater than the of number, so you're going to have a peanut. That's pretty easy, isn't it? Okay, this is practice B. What percent of 20 is 80? Now copy it down and pause your video. Okay, so we're going to write this one out, and I'm going to use the ratio method this time. So we're going to say what percent is P over 100. And remember, the 100 is always the of number, so the of number will go down here. And the is number will go on top. So I'm using the ratio method this time. I want you to be able to do them all. So we wind up with P over 100 is 4. Okay, so to find the percentage, aren't we just going to multiply both sides by 100? Or we can put 4 over 1 and cross multiply and get P is 400. So the P was the percentage. So we have 400%. So 400% of 20 is 80. Now remember, I told you at the beginning of this video that if we had 200%, it was double. If we had 300%, it was triple. And here we have 400%, and it is 4 times what we started with. Okay, so on this one, we're going to use the method I usually use, which is to take 140% and write it with a 100 on the bottom. Of is times what number is equal 364. Instant equation. Okay, so now remember, my job is to get the what number by itself. Let's clean this up just a little bit, take those zeros off. And then I want to get rid of this. So I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, 10 over 14. I could simplify it first, but I don't have to. And so over here, I have to multiply by the same thing. Whatever I do to the left, I must do to the right. Okay, so now, isn't this gone now? So we just have what number is, and I have to do this math. Wouldn't it be cool if 14 went into 364 evenly? I don't know if it does or not, but let's see. So we've got, now when I multiply by 10, I'm going to get 3640. And now I'm going to divide by the 14. So 14 goes into 36, and that's going to be twice. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 1 is 2. And 36 minus 28 is going to be 8. And that cancels. So we don't have anything there. We bring down the 4. And 14 into 84 is going to go, I think, 6 times. Let's try it. 6 times 4 is 24. So we get a 4 right there. 6 and carry the 2. 6 times 1 plus 2 is 8. And we get the 84. So I ran out of room, but it does go out evenly. And then I would just get what? One more 0 because I've got a 0 right there. So 260 is my what number? Okay, so 260. 140% of 260 is 364. And that sounds right, doesn't it? Because the 140 is greater than 100. So the is number must be greater than the of number. And it is. And I think we're done with that lesson. I hope you got that one right. Did you get it right before you looked at my answer? I hope so. This is Mrs. A, and may God bless your day.